It's a big day for NASA, a big day for everyone. We are headed back to the moon, and this is kind of one of the stepping blocks, I would say. So later today, there's going to be a landing on the moon. I feel like not enough people know about this. Can you tell me what's going to happen?
Sure. So this is part of NASA's, it's really a new way of going to the moon. We haven't landed on the moon in 50 years. This time we're relying upon commercial companies to deliver our science instruments to the moon. So a company called Intuitive Machines launched last week. They've made it all the way to the lunar orbit. Later this afternoon, they will attempt to land on the moon, the first time a commercial entity's ever landed on the moon. What's
in this special package of stuff that's being delivered to the moon?
NASA is planning and preparing under our Artemis program for future human landings on the moon. So as a predecessor to that, to help us get ready, remember we haven't been on the moon in 50 years, and we have a lot better technology than we did back then, but we're also going to a different place. We're going to the South Pole. So in these early missions, starting with the one we hope to land this afternoon, we'll be sending science instruments to the moon and technology demonstrations that help us prepare for the future human missions. For example, we have a radiation sensor on this mission that tells us more about the radiation environment at the South Pole of the moon. That will help us prepare to protect humans when they go.
So you say the South Pole. Can you tell me why the South Pole, why this location, and how far it is from where we've been before?
It's quite a ways. All the Apollo missions landed in the mid-latitudes or near the equator. The South Pole, really both the North and the South Pole have these characteristics, so the South Pole is where we're choosing right now. When you take humans somewhere, one of the things they need is water. A lot of things that allow humans to survive and work and live starts with water. We can turn water into oxygen we can breathe. We can turn it into working fluids. We can even turn it into fuel that the rockets can use. The only places on the moon we're likely to find water might be at the poles. The moon there's no atmosphere. It's blasted by the sun. But there is some evidence that at the poles, areas where we don't get full sunlight all the time, there might be some water buried in the soil. So going to the poles might give us the opportunity to find water that we can use for future human activities.
So are any of these tools like a big shovel then?
We're not quite ready for that yet. Right now, the early instruments are mostly about detecting what we call volatiles. That is the type of chemical composition where water and soil are bound up together. And we will do some digging in the soil, small shovels or drills that help us do digging. We're not so much on this mission. This mission is just getting us there, proving we can land. But we have already 3 or 4 future missions planned where we'll be taking drills and digging into the soil and bringing up that soil and running it through things like spectrometers that help us analyze the composition of the soil and find out if there's volatiles in water.
It's getting close, right? It's orbiting. So what has been the process, and then what's the process to get down to start this up the moon?
Yeah, always remember, it's very, very, spaceflight is hard, very difficult. So they launched last week. They've been going through the process of getting themselves to the moon. It took them about 6 days. They fired their engines multiple times. This was the first spacecraft that fired fuel called LOX methane, liquid oxygen and methane. We'd never used that in space before. This is the first vehicle that's used that. So they were able to prove their engines work, and they were able to get us to the moon. Then they had to use those engines to get into lunar orbit. They did that. They're very successfully in lunar orbit. They've been revolving around the moon now for about a day. Later this afternoon, they will fire those engines again to slow them down. As you slow down, you start getting down towards the surface, and then eventually they will land on the rocket plume, just like we saw the Apollo missions land.
It's funny because I think people think, okay, you're just going to leave it there for how long? But there's nothing happening on the moon, right? So we could literally leave this there, and in 50 years, it would be untouched, right?
Yeah. Sunlight, and that's about it, right? It'll get hot and it's cold. There's no atmosphere. It'll stay there forever once it's there.
Okay, but when is it going to be made useful?
Good question. Hard to say right now. The Artemis mission is planned to put humans back on the moon before the end of the decade. So we hope to have landings on the moon with humans within 2 or 3 years. They won't be landing right where this one goes. But the data in the South Pole region is close enough to help us understand the environment. And somewhere down the road, we'll be able to take advantage of what we learned from these missions. I think it'll be fairly soon.
I know there's probably still some stuff up there from the Apollo missions. Is there any way that any of that equipment will be made useful again, you think?
That's been there a long time now, and that was 1960s technology, so I wouldn't put too much hope in that. And in fact, we actually have a law in the United States that says you cannot land close to the Apollo missions. We're preserving those sites as historical locations. So yeah, that technology is pretty old. I would not plan on getting much out of those hardwares. And right now we would like to preserve those for future historical opportunities.
Chris, is there anything else you want to add about today's mission?
Space business is hard. Nobody's ever landed successfully a robotic mission the first time they tried. If Intuitive Machines is able to pull out Alpha Sector, they'll be the first one that's done that. And they're doing it at a fraction of the cost of the governments that spent money to get there. So we're optimistic. We're really impressed with their technical skills, but this is hard to do.
Chris, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you so much for watching. While you're here, check out some other videos you just may like.